because we had a narrow audience of shipping and international trade readers. They were increasingly geographically dispersed. And you had this wonderful new invention called the internet.
Before we get started with the show, here's a quick word from our sponsor, Global Training Center. As trade compliance professionals, you want to make sure that your procedures and documentation are completed as correctly as possible to avoid any delays and possible fines. We provide a range of trade compliance courses that will fit your needs. From in-person or web training to recorded on-demand courses, we can train one or even thousands on your team through your learning platform or on our portal. We can even customize a private session for your team. Go to globaltrainingcenter.com to find out more.
Folks, we have got a great show today with Simply Trade Podcast, and we're highlighting a particular thing that's coming up. It's, if you've been wondering about what's going on with the Red Sea and the attacks on cargo ships and the impact on the supply chain, there's been a lot of folks around that have seemed to be panicking in this. And what's it mean? Well, we've got a good show today that I think you need to listen to. And it's going to be something that, in particular, there's a conference that we're going to also highlight that if you really want to know more about that. But Lila, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about what we've got coming up here?
Yeah. This is now becoming a little bit of a trend for us because we are starting to get individuals and organizations that are promoting, or not promoting, but promoting their event, and they want us to highlight them or talk to them. Usually, what we do is that we'll talk to them and just mention the event. But what we're doing, like in today's case, we're going to have a guest from TPM, TransPacific Maritime Conference, come on the show and talk to us about that. But not only that, but he's also going to talk about what is going on in just everything, like geopolitical stuff going down in the Red Sea, et cetera, and how those will be addressed and talked about at the event. And so it's pretty cool, that we're doing that. And so now Andy, we'll just have to add another theme of our show, and call it Simply Trade Events, right? I mean, it's just like we're getting ready to air another show here pretty soon on ICPA as well as NCBFAA. So I know we have several others that we're going to try to help promote. But for now, Andy, you and I told you that I've known this individual, Peter Tirschwell, here for about 15, 16 years now. And I thought I'd reach out to him so he can let us know about the conference. I think you read up or studied a little bit more about him.
Yeah, he's the senior editor, I guess, of the Journal of Commerce, and he's got such phenomenal credentials from a journalistic perspective. But not only that, I mean, the guy has just been phenomenal in chairing the conference. This conference is a huge conference. In 2023. They had well over 3,000 attendees. That's just the attendees. And I believe they're expecting to blow the doors off of that this year. So, folks, I'm going to tell you, if you deal in container ship modes of transportation and looking at the impact of the different things going on, I'm sure there's going to be some discussions not only of the Red Sea, which seems to be the hot button, but also for the Panama Canal. What's the latest down there regarding the drought? And do we see any forecasts for improved rainfall in the Panama region so that frequencies of ships can move through quicker? If they can or cannot, what do you do? What the impact is if you're planning? So all of that, Peter seems to be somebody that seems to have a good handle and connections with people around the globe, and he and his team have done a good job of that. So I'm very impressed with this conference that's going to come up.
Yep. Okay, so let's go ahead and bring him in then. Thanks, Andy.
All righty. Peter, listen, we have seen your post on the LinkedIn with the Red Sea comments and all that, and I'm kind of shocked, to be honest. I really like your article where I'm shocked that people are going, oh no, this is worse than COVID as far as the impact on supply chain and everything. I think it's kind of like Chicken Little and the sky is falling, and it's like, come on, calm down a little bit. Everything's going to be all right. But are you still seeing people that are in panic mode, or are they kind of taking their breath and going, all right, the Red Sea situation with container ships and attacks and different things, are things calming down and people are adjusting, or what do you see right now?
Well, I think that there's definitely a gap between what's being reported by a lot of there's emerged this whole kind of category of what you might call hyperventilizing media, who are free media, who are their business model is based on clickbait, and so any opportunity to exaggerate what's going on, they're going to take full advantage because their advertisers want as many clicks as possible. But the problem is that it diverts them away from what's really happening. And what's really happening is that this is a crisis for sure. I mean, it will go down in the history of ocean container supply chains as one of the biggest events since Malcolm McLean, the Suez Canal being effectively shut, all container services now diverting around the Cape of Good Hope, adding anywhere from 10 days to more than 20 days. So, potentially, up to 3 weeks delay. And there is impact. I mean, when you are, when you're running your supply chains, an additional 2 weeks, an additional 3 weeks means that your all of your planning, all of your manufacturing has to be earlier. Your working capital commitments are higher because you have to have a whole sort of pipeline of inventory from beginning to end in order to consistently serve your customers. Interest rates are higher, so the cost of capital is higher. The gap between when you place orders and when you sell to your customers is greater, so it's harder to forecast. Because there's a greater amount of time that the more that you're trying to forecast into the future, obviously it becomes more and more inaccurate, or there's more sort of risk to your forecast. So all of that is very real. There's no question about it. But what is happening though is that it's settling down, because in general there is this happened at a moment when there's a lot of capacity in the market. A lot of vessels are around. The number of actual physical containers that was built during COVID itself, a huge increase in container production, meaning that there are containers everywhere. There's containers in Asia. There's containers in Europe, and so therefore, if one of the phenomenon when capacity tightens up in the container shipping world is that maybe a ship is available, but there's no containers to put your stuff in. And if it's, boxes of merchandise there's this, we're not in the break bulk days anymore. You're not loading that box by box. You actually have to have a container to put it in. So there is no capacity problem, and there's also no demand surge. I mean, the COVID disruptions, the 100+ ships that were outside of LA, the dozens of ships that were outside many ports on the East Coast, that was demand driven. There was too much cargo being shipped against the capacity of the ships, and particularly the ports. The ports were unable to handle that much volume, and the importers, the retailers, weren't able to remove their containers from the port quickly enough because they had no warehouse space. And as a result of that, that's what led the vessels to back up. So we're not seeing any phenomenon like that whatsoever. Global container growth last year was in the neighborhood of 0.2%. So it barely grew last year. And even with the COVID spike that we saw, if you were to go back to 2018, something like that, even then volumes are growing at a sub 1% level. So nobody should be distracted by the fact that we have a good U.S. economy, very resilient U.S. economy, low unemployment. It doesn't matter that there's been structural shifts in the economy. and there is not this surge of consumer goods spending. The other major factor affecting containerized trade is the fact that because interest rates are so high, now mortgage rates are much higher than they were. That has depressed the housing market. And when a big driver of building materials, construction, white goods, washing machines, dishwashers is when you buy a new home, whether you buy a new home or you buy a home from somebody else, you're going to want to refurbish it and make it your home because you're not going to live in somebody else's life. And so that drives a lot of containerized cargo. And that's very depressed right now. So as a result, we're not seeing port congestion right now. We're not really seeing significant delays at the ports, and the services are normalizing. So I'm going on a little bit sort of endlessly here, but that's the situation.
Yeah, well, I know because I know we're short on time, and you do need to get going. I wanted to bring in and talk a little bit about your conference that you're holding in Long Beach here at the end of, well, not the end of February, but it's more at the beginning of March in Long Beach. It's called TPM. It's in its 24th year, the TransPacific Maritime Conference. I believe I read somewhere that you started it or you founded it, and you keep on sharing it and growing it more and more. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because it pertains a lot to what we're just talking about, the Red Sea, and obviously a lot of other stuff.
Yeah. So the everything you said is correct. If you go back 24 years, this is all TPM is organized by the Journal of Commerce. The Journal of Commerce was the daily shipping newspaper of New York City. It's almost 200 years old. It was founded by Samuel Morse in the 1820s. And it could no longer, it has an illustrious history. And we're gonna do a big 200th anniversary celebration coming up in 2027 that we're already starting to work on. What happened around the year 2000 was that the daily print newspaper, which had been around since that time, could no longer be economically published because we had a narrow audience of shipping and international trade readers. They were increasingly geographically dispersed, and you had this wonderful new invention called the internet, where you could instantaneously get your content to people without having to print a publication. And so the daily newspaper actually ended in the year 2000, but the brand lived on. The team was still intact. Me and a number of colleagues, several of them are still with us today. And we said, well, we want to continue to cover this industry. We want to continue to be journalists. We don't want to do anything else. Perfectly happy. But we need new revenue to support our work because all the revenue associated with the newspaper was gone. So we said, well, why don't we invite our sources, who we normally call up onto the phone by the phone? Why don't we invite them on stage and hit them with the hard questions in front of a live audience? And also orient our content, as we always did, even well back into the daily newspaper days, oriented towards the cargo. So in other words, the Journal of Commerce has never been a maritime publication, so to speak, appealing to the maritime industry, ship owners, marine insurance, maritime lawyers, maritime finance, vessel building and construction. That's really never been our interest. It's always been commerce, the Journal of Commerce, which is trade. So we've always spoken to and interacted with and kind of considered the so-called BCOs, the cargo owners, to be our primary audience. And so that's why at TPM, when you're there, you're going to see hundreds of cargo owners from ExxonMobil Chemical, Archer Daniels Midland, Cargill, Target, Home Depot, Walmart. When you look at a big container ship, whose goods are inside the containers, that audience is who we orient ourselves towards.
All right. With that, let me ask this question: do you think that with the conference there, if I am planning my logistics, my supply chain, my transportation, whatever, any of those different types of people from different companies, would they be able to gain some, insight as to what to expect over the next year, 2 years, or whatever, based on the conference that you're looking at? I mean, it's almost a softball pitch here, but I don't mean it that way. I mean it more from, what am I going to do? Because this stuff, who would have thought about the attacks in the Red Sea? Okay, fine. But your sources, your different things like that, and are there opportunities that are created rather than the negatives out of this situation, such as in South Africa or Namibia or somewhere over in there where there may be some opportunities? Would attending your conference in Long Beach be something that I would gain some of that insight?
Oh, no question about it. I mean, you're not going to have the economic development people of South Africa or Namibia there trying to tell you to source your goods out of their country. So it's not the conference where, if you're going to migrate your sourcing from one country to another, where do you do that and what are the best countries? However, if you're considering something along those lines, all of the major freight forwarders are there. And many of them have global networks, and they're going to be really interested in talking to you about what your needs are, and how they are able to support you in terms of what kind of boots on the ground they have, what local expertise, local contacts, because ultimately the so-called BCO companies, beneficial cargo owners, are in the business that they're in. They're in the chemical business, agriculture, manufacturing, retail, consumer products, whatever it is. They rely on logistics partners to help them facilitate their extended global supply chains. And so on one hand, they need to know what's happening in the market. Is there going to be enough space on vessels? Is capacity going to support their needs? What's the pricing situation looking like? Are there any disruption potential on the horizon, like longshore labor disputes? That's an issue we still face the potential of in the U.S., particularly on the East Coast, where there's a contract negotiation this year. But also from the perspective of services, who is out there who can help you to achieve the goals that you've set forth as a company in whichever business you happen to be in.
Okay. Well, as far as the sign up of the for the conference, I mean, how many people are attending so far? Do you plan on seeing in Long Beach?
Yeah, so we had 3,600 people in 2023. We're going to blow through that number, so we're going to be higher than that this year. So the growth of TPM will continue in 2024. So it hasn't grown every year because it didn't grow in 2009. It kind of went backwards, and then during COVID we actually canceled TPM in 2020, the day before it was going to begin, because COVID was just descending on all of us at that moment, and we said we just pulled the plug. And this crazy, momentous, disruptive decision, because there were already many attendees who were already in Long Beach, and now we canceled the event out from under them. And then in 2021, we did it virtually, but then it's been since 2022, 2023. This year, it's going to be back on a growth trajectory. So we're, very happy to see that it's continuing to.
Well, the speakers that you have listed on your website are absolutely phenomenal. I mean, I'm looking at this not from a, who's who, but I mean, seriously, people that have the true knowledge, are well respected. And what I'm looking at is like, my goodness, this is, I mean, CEOs, the C-suites, the different ones. I mean, that's phenomenal. So to your credit, Peter, that's one of them where the Journal of Commerce has got a lot of credibility in inviting and getting people to be speakers. Is there anything in particular that you see of that maybe worthwhile to make sure if you're going, that you got to make sure you're at this particular session or event?
Well, certainly, Robert Gates, former defense secretary, is he's gonna give us a geopolitical outlook because if anything, the Red Sea crisis and the attacks on shipping showed that there is a absolute relevance of geopolitics for containerized supply chains. Those two worlds have really collided head on here, and he's going to be able to offer perspective on that. We're going to have two container line CEOs on the program. Jeremy Nixon of ONE, the Singapore-based joint venture of the the former Japanese container lines. Rolf Haben-Jansen, he is the CEO of Hapag-Lloyd. They just signed a new alliance agreement with Maersk. We're going to have the head of the Maersk ocean product there, the senior, one of the senior most executives of Maersk, talking about how they're positioning themselves. Many BCOs, cargo owners, are on the program talking about the industry and their challenges and what they see ahead, what they see coming. But the reason why all this happens, Andy, is basically, we're not event organizers. We're journalists. And this event was started by journalists as a journalistic exercise. We put on panels the same way we write our articles. In other words, if you're a journalist and you're writing an article, you're saying to yourself, well, who are the most qualified people that I'm going to call up and interview and quote? And I get to make that decision because I'm an independent journalist, and we've been an independent team with a very strong editorial tradition going back, hundreds of years at this point, and that culture has carried right into this event and made it what it is.
Is there anything in particular, before we start wrapping up here, that as we're looking at, and again, we'll probably gain from the conference, but is there anything that keeps you up at night regarding the supply chain that's going on, issues and disruptions and all that that you see?
I mean, I think the point really is that we're in a completely different era. If you were to take post financial crisis 2009, 2010, and even before that, the shocks, if you will, to containerized supply chains were few and far between, and they were relatively minor. Maybe. Okay, in 2010, there was a restocking squeeze where, a ton of cargo poured out of China. There weren't enough ships. The freight rates skyrocketed. The retailers were pissed off. Everybody was at loggerheads. But guess what? By July, August of that year, it had settled down. Hanjin was the number 7 largest ocean carrier in 2016. They went bankrupt. Several hundred ships were idled, as well as all the cargo. Okay, so that was a bump in the road. It was inconvenient and painful at the time, but it settled down after a few months. When the Trump administration was going to impose tariffs on China in 2018, there was a minor surge of volumes where people were trying to get China-made cargo into the country prior to the tariffs taking place. That backed up the ports briefly. These were little bumps in the road, nothing compared to COVID, nothing compared to what we're seeing in the Red Sea. And so we're in a whole different era of risk and uncertainty and disruption happening on a scale that it didn't happen before. And for a cargo owner running, a long haul supply chain, for lack of a better term, paying really, really close attention to this world and really knowing who's out there who can help you and really remaining very, very close to what's happening, almost week to week, because conditions change. A port that was uncongested 2 weeks later is congested. 4 weeks later is experiencing a massive bottleneck. And you have to be very close to the market in order to be able to react to it. And I think that's one of the providing value to people who have a need for that type of proximity to the beating heart of the market. That's kind of the role that my team and I play or try to play.
Well, I will say to our folks is like, listen, the Journal of Commerce, there's joc.com would be one of the locations to websites to be able to pull up your information, not only to subscribe to the JOC, but then also to find out more about the conference. And with that, Lalo, anything you want to ask Peter before we let him get off the hook here?
No, I'm respectful of your time, Peter. I hopefully will catch up with you at the conference, since we do plan on being there, maybe taking some clips and posting those on social and just spreading the word out. But for everybody that's interested in attending, and there's still information, you can look at our show notes. And you'll find the link to the registration page and to the Journal of Commerce, and maybe even to Peter or whatever. So we'll post that. But Peter, thank you very much for joining us.
Fantastic. Great to be with you guys today. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I look forward to seeing you in a few weeks.
Yes, sir. Have a safe travels.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you very much for joining us. Simply Trade is brought to you by the generous contributions of Global Training Center. You can follow the show and GTC on LinkedIn or Twitter and other social networks. Make sure you check out the show notes in the description for a full rundown of today's show with all the important links. Also, make sure that you share this with a friend and subscribe on your favorite streaming platform. We really like hearing from you. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to rate and review wherever you listen to this podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest in the show, or would like to sponsor Simply Trade, or suggest any topic you would like for us to discuss, please contact us via email at simplytrade@globaltrainingcenter.com, or you can DM us on Twitter at simplytradepod. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. Happy trading. Simply Trade is not a law firm or an advisor. The topics and discussions conducted by Simply Trade hosts and guests should not be considered and is not intended to substitute legal advice. You should seek appropriate counsel for your own situations. These conversations and information are directed towards listeners in the United States for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only, and should not be substituted for legal advice. No listener or viewer of this podcast should act or refrain from acting on the basis of information on this podcast without first seeking legal advice from counsel. Information on this podcast may not be up to date depending on the time of publishing and the time of viewership. The content of this posting is provided as is. No representations are made that the content is error-free. The views expressed in or through this podcast are those of the individual speakers, not those of their respective employers or Global Training Center as a whole. All liability with respect to actions taken or not taken based on the contents of this podcast are hereby expressly disclaimed.